Welcome to the What If It's Not Depression podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Achina Stein. Today is a topic that I have not broached with anyone in all the interviews I've done. And fortunately, we have today Dr. Robin Rose, who is going to be discussing that and how it might even be connected to mental health issues. Dr. Robin Rose began her life as a child prodigy ballet dancer. As she unfolded into her destiny, she lived in a fishing village in India as a young adult and worked with the local doctor. Upon returning to the United States, she became a health food chef and herbalist, and then slowly wandered through the educational system, first becoming an RN, then nurse practitioner, and ultimately a family physician. Her roots in natural healing evolved into a holistic medical odyssey, offering eclectic, holistic family medicine in a small town in Oregon. After many years, she moved to Hawaii and has since evolved into a precision practice for early kidney disease or early renal disease and the regeneration that is possible. She and her husband live at the beach with gardens of food and botanicals, and recently published Renology Peptides, which is a definitive guide on kidney success using bioregulator peptides. I hope this is a very informative episode, and if you like it, please click the like button and subscribe. Welcome, Dr. Rose.
Thank you. I'm delighted to do this chat with you.
Yeah, me too. I'm really excited. So I think it's, I want to get into how you got into functional medicine, and I know that it started with your own health issues, but I think it's going to be really important at some point to bring up what exactly bioregulator peptides. It's a lot of syllables there. To explain to the audience what that is, and I'll let you start wherever you want to start in terms of answering both those questions.
Well, I started thinking differently, somewhat out of the normal box, really in the 60s, and evolved myself, like I said, to be doing nutrition. I needed a job, so I lied and said I had experience and just became this health food chef, and studied a lot. I've always been a nerd, so I was learning about nutritional science while I was doing that. And so by the time I got to med school, I never signed up for functional medicine.
You were just
doing I was part of what evolved into that. We called it a lot of different things over the decades. And so, alternative medicine, that didn't sound good because it's not really an alternate. It's, complementary. I like that. Holistic really speaks to me. I was on the board of the Holistic Medical Association as a med student, and had Andrew Weil at my med school. So I really learned medicine through that filter. I would be writing botanical and nutritional and supplemental stuff on my notes from med school. If people borrowed my notes, they'd be like, "Oh, they talked about that." I was like, "No, I'm just doing my own thing here." So it never wasn't part of what I did. My practice really was eclectic, and each person really calls for something different. And so I was very blessed. Ashland, Oregon was a sweet place to practice. People wanted what I was doing. And so it was really, really a delight. The sad part of my story is I got embezzled, which I'm over it, but it was a huge trauma. Insane. And so long and short of it is, some time after that, I was diagnosed with kidney cancer. Was clear I want a nephrectomy. Basically woke up 3 months later living in this beautiful place, but I had a GFR, which is glomerular filtration rate, the number that we use. It's basically a formula that we made up, but it's useful. I was at the border of severe kidney disease, which wasn't exactly what it was advertised as. You can live with one kidney, no worries. Meanwhile, they were giving me a 5-year death sentence. Don't be surprised, Diff. And,
Mm.
I either went into like anger mode or prayer mode, depending on my mood, and was very aware of kind of the conversation we're going to talk about, because the suppression of my chemistry was so crazy. I mean, my
Mm.
mind wasn't working, my mood was disrupted. I mean, I was very dysregulated. And as a longtime meditator and somebody who does yoga, I used that. I clung to that because I knew that it was like I was in this storm and didn't get much support from the medical people that I was reaching out to until I started talking to my functional friends and found some naturopaths who work with kidney, and that really shifted my approach from I'm going to die in 5 years to this is a regenerative disease. And so ultimately, long story short, after really a decade of studying, exploring, learning different things, got my GFR up to 68, which
Mm.
is stage 2. And conventionally, that's considered normal, but I disagree with that because there's so much that's already going awry that we have wonderful, mostly natural, self-motivated things to do.
Mm.
So, anybody who's hearing this is like, listen to those subtle messages, because if you do, you can change this. And so,
Right.
I did a
Can I can
lot.
I
I mean,
can I ask you where you believe optimal renal health should be? Above 95?
I mean, that's wonderful. That's
Yeah.
like in stage 1.
Hmm.
I mean, there's some truth to the fact that aging declines body function in general, but
Hmm.
it's not like, oh, you're old, so it's gonna happen.
Right.
And that's my seg into why I fell in love with the bioregulator peptides.
Hmm.
So here's my dance, since I'm a dancer. Proteins are big wound up molecules,
Hmm.
and the body deals with them in different ways. What's showing is the active
Hmm.
places. Um, Peptides are like a little piece of it, and
Hmm.
they're potent. We all know about peptides because insulin's a peptide. Most of our hormones are peptides. So it's like, okay, we kind of get this. But the bioregulators, which came along the pike, I had already started really improving. I mean, my function had gotten up to 51, and then I discovered bioregulators and peptides, and that was like a journey. I mean, an incredible odyssey. So bioregulators are tiny. They're like 2 to 4, maybe 7 amino acids. There's different formulations. Some of them are bulkier molecules, but they're tiny. And so what that means is they can get in the cell very easily.
Mm.
The cell is like, a big gate. They can get in. They're also recognized by the body as self. So they're really safe. And they can actually get in the nucleus. And here's the cool part about it. They actually lodge in the DNA, stretch it open, and repair epigenetic damage.
Mm.
So what happens to us while we're living can tweak our genes.
Mm.
And what that means is different chemistries happening. Some of it might be okay, but a lot of it isn't. And it's what leads to disease. So, the whole conversation about epigenetics was like this big celebration with these bioregulators. And I was part of a study
Mhm.
that was replicating some of the Russian research because they originated out of Russia. And it's a longevity study. And so we cycled all of the bioregulators. They basically are animal extracts, so they replicate. There's many: brain, pineal, eyes, thymus, thyroid, lung, heart, blood vessels, stomach, muscles, cartilage, bone, bladder, parathyroid, um, ovary, prostate, testes.
Mhm.
And my book really talks about how all of these things influence the syndrome of kidney decline. And I want to sidebar is you probably are seeing more people than you realize who have kidney decline.
Mhm.
And part of what I'm doing, essentially teaching this, is that a GFR over 60 is still CKD. Maybe, okay, not chronic kidney disease. That
Right.
sounds, alarming. How about chronic kidney decline?
Hmm.
Because once that function starts declining,
Hmm.
the vulnerability is there. Somebody gets the flu,
Right.
there goes their function. And so, or a medication or, solar flares. I mean, it's really incredible how many things can
Right.
dysregulate diminished function.
Sure. I
And
mean,
it's
and some,
avoidable.
right, and some people get the diagnosis of chronic renal insufficiency. Right.
Yeah.
So it's another word that might be describing that it's not actual kidney disease in a conventional sense. But, from a functional medicine standpoint, we want optimal health. We want your kidneys to be working top notch at all times because it's a major filter of your body of toxins, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah, so it's
Yeah.
really important to get it at least above, I mean, what's unfortunate is that some labs indicate that the renal function, the estimated GFR, glomerular filtration rate, just says greater than 60. It's like
Yeah.
that's not helpful.
No, it really isn't. It's changing. There are more and more labs that they actually give a number, which helps. And there's a formula you can, fit fit the greater than 60. What is it? 61 or 81? There's a difference. And what I've been finding is that, the glomerulus is one thing, but the tubules are where the action is.
Hmm.
And the tubules start dysfunctioning before the GFR even
Mm,
twinks at you.
right.
And so part of the work I'm doing lately is looking at how can we actually identify some tubular decline.
Hmm.
Because even, I did some research in anticipation of this conversation, and some of the stuff we're going to talk about can already be going on in stage 2. And some people don't even find out till they're in stage 4, which is crazy. It's like 25% function left.
Right.
It's
Right.
like, what are we waiting for? I mean,
Right.
that's like my Jersey girl, like, what are you waiting for? Why don't we do something? And of course, conversing in the functional community, people are interested. And of course, we want to optimize and reverse and
Right.
regenerate. I mean,
Yeah.
why not?
So while we're talking about labs, can you just mention some other labs that are really important to look at when it comes to the kidney?
There's lots, just the basic labs that most people get, in and out doctor visits, a complete blood count, a CBC, has some indications because anemia is an issue as kidney disease advances. So you can look at the red blood cell status. That's okay. If it's a little bit declined, it can be 1,000 different things, obviously. So, the mental construct that knows to even consider kidney starts noticing. On a chemistry panel, things like sodium and
Mhm.
potassium and chloride. Um, the
Mhm.
CO2 is enormously important because people with kidney issues become acidotic.
Mhm.
And so if I see a CO2 under 25, I'm already raising my eyebrow like, what's going on?
Mhm.
Um, Cystatin C is another test to use instead of or along with the GFR, because GFR is kind of imperfect. If somebody is very bulky physically, big muscles, they may have a false elevation because
Mhm.
creatinine is what the GFR is based on. And a skinny little old person whose muscles are tiny may, also have an abnormal presentation. It may not look like they have kidney disease, although they do. And so the cystatin C is really helpful.
Mhm.
And phosphorus is an enormously helpful thing. Parathyroid, uric acid, I mean, and that's not even looking at the functional labs. And then on a urinalysis, I mean, there's all kinds of things that are useful. How concentrated is the urine? Is there any blood in the urine? Is there any protein in the urine? Which right away says
Right.
be worried, because that's not a good sign. And there's stuff to do. So it's like, worry, but don't linger there. Be active instead of
Right.
fretting. And
Absolutely.
so,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So let's talk more about, you wrote what is CKD, and what is kidney success. And
yeah.
tell me more about what you mean by that.
I had a wonderful integrative oncologist, Dawn Lemon, and she early on just said to me, don't use the term kidney failure.
Mm,
For one thing, you're not in failure, you're in decline. Okay. This was
I love that.
early
I love that.
learning in the effect of the limbic system. Because when you hear failure,
Right.
portal to depression,
Mm-hmm.
to grief.
Absolutely.
I'm blanked,
Right.
It's
Hopelessness and helplessness. Absolutely.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so over time, I mean, I've been delving into this now for a good decade, and the nephrology community really isn't that focused on early kidney disease. So I was, okay, primary care and other specialties that aren't kidney need to know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And especially primary care, let's do it early. If we have, a nutritional, natural, inclusive practice, this is a no-brainer. So, but they started saying nobody knows what the word renal means, so we're not going to use it. So I'm like, I'll take it. And so I basically, it was kind of like tongue in cheek. I was like, I'll take it. I'm going to call this Renology, the art and clinical science of kidney success.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you say that, I mean, everybody I say that to just smiles. It's like, ah, because I mean, who wants failure? And failure sounds like there isn't really much option for me. It is depressing. And so that was the beginning of this mindset change, a new paradigm for kidneys to celebrate. First of all, it's a major organ, and even in the functional setting, I mean, the mention of kidney is so rare.
Mm-hmm. It
It's
is.
crazy,
I agree with you. Yeah. So you mentioned nutrition and food. Can you tell us more about what foods and what types of nutritional um, additions that people can include in their daily lifestyle to keep their kidneys healthy?
You know, there's a big surge for high protein right now.
Yes.
High protein in meat.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I advise against.
Mm-hmm.
With kidney, it's a quirk.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is kind of peculiar. Things that you think are healthy may not be, to sustain kidney and help reverse damage.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean the damage being that over time, oxidative stress, you rust and you fibrose.
Mm-hmm.
Those are things that we can reverse. Um, and so what you eat really has to be pure.
Mm-hmm.
And I encourage organic food. There's a chapter in my book about microplastics and glyphosate, because these actually can harm the kidney tubules. And you might not even know it until things are more advanced. And that's been my concern for the world, is like, we need to do better. Um, it's mostly encouraged, and everybody's different. Everybody presents with kidney disease with a little different collage, but protein limited to, and here's the formula, 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of optimal weight.
Mm-hmm.
You got to use your calculator, but there's a way to figure this out. Chronometer.com is wonderful, because you can, I mean, how much protein do you eat? I didn't know. I mean, I had no clue. And then to find out, oh, things like broccoli and rice are actually contributing protein. So you're eating more protein than the kidneys can handle to recover.
Mm-hmm.
Once the recovery happens, things can shift, and restrictions can lighten up. But, I think things like tofu and legumes really have a place. What do you do without meat and cheese? And even eggs, the issue is phosphorus. And
Hmm.
phosphorus does this thing that the cartoon is, it sucks calcium out of the bones and puts them in the arteries. Two significant problems in the progression of kidney disease. There's a specific bone problem that happens, and there's, atherosclerosis and cardio disease is basically what kills most kidney patients, not kidney disease per se.
Hmm.
And so the diet matters, lots of fruits and vegetables. It depends on your lab. Some people have high potassium. And so, there's a little guidance on, you know, I didn't eat avocados and bananas for a long time because they're really high. I was growing kale. I stopped eating it because my potassium was elevated. I found out, oh, if I pull enough is better, I can deal with it, and my potassium got more normal. Little bicarbonate is magic. So there's a lot of wonderful, easy tricks, cheap. And so there's that. Sleep matters, and part of the talk about depression is about the circadian disruption with kidney. And so it's like so many people will tell me, oh, I don't sleep good. And it's like, well, we're going to work on that because it's essential for repairing kidney. Exercise, something daily, even if it's laying on your bed doing leg lifts, something where there's movement and flow of chi, and the endorphins which comes of it. Detox is huge, getting rid of all the chemicals in your bathroom and under your kitchen sink, in your pantry, in your head. And so the whole mind body part of acceptance and self-forgiveness and self-love, um, avoiding toxic people as well as possible. um, I mean, all of these things really are important, the heavy metal thing. And so it becomes a bit of a lifestyle to
Right.
be supportive of it. And there's kind of a balance in it being a lifestyle or being an obsession. The oh, poor me is really quite available when you're feeling sick, And and so, the work with limbic system is huge.
Right. Yeah, you're talking about a lot of things that are really good for every organ.
Yeah,
I mean, these are all interventions that we recommend as functional medicine doctors. But, one thing that you mentioned that I would love for you to elaborate is bicarbonate. That's very specific for the kidney.
yeah.
Yeah, you said that's magic. Tell us more about how bicarbonate is magic.
So I can tell a personal story because it's
Mhm.
kind of funny. I mean, I had not really a very diminished CO2 on my labs, more like 25, it's like 20 to 30 is most labs range.
Right. And where do you
But I
want?
was having elevated uric acid, elevated PTH. My potassium just wouldn't go down, and I was neurologically affected by it. So I was like, really worried about, eggplant's good, but this, I can eat this, but I can't eat that. And it was working. I felt better. But not one of the doctors I saw suggested bicarbonate. Facebook kidney groups. That's where I learned this. So I went to the local thrift store on my island, which there's not much shopping on this island. And so here I go in the thrift store, and what do I find? A brand new bottle, unopened, unexpired, of bicarb tablets. I took this as, a divine message, started taking bicarb. All of these things normalized.
Hmm.
So, with tubules, there's transporters. So, things, I think about the tubules as the seat of discernment,
Mhm.
which is really one of the poetic ways of seeing kidney. What do I keep and what do I get rid of? That's a life lesson. And so the tubules are, what do you keep and what do you pee out? And so acid, the hydrogen, ion of acid, like when you think of HCl, stomach acid, the H is the acid part of it. And the transporters may or may not be working well. And so too much acid gets kept instead of excreted. In that case, too much acidity in the body damages a lot of processes that are life requiring, that we need. And so by alkalinizing, which means a more vegetable diet, meat and cheese and eggs and grains acidify. So part of the diet thinking is that if I can keep myself more alkaline, all of these things that are looking bad on labs will normalize. What that means is then the healing can happen.
Mm-hmm. And so where do you like to see the CO2?
I like it over 25, closer to 30.
Mm-hmm.
And I got one warning from one of the nephrologists when I talked about this is if it gets higher into the 30s, it's really not so bad, except there's a little bit of risk for congestive failure. If that's not happening, then you're okay.
Mm-hmm. That's
And
great.
so pretty much everybody that I talk to, I'm either telling them to use magnesium citrate,
Mm-hmm.
which magnesium is helpful unless it's more advanced kidney disease, and then you really have to be more careful. But, stage 2 and 3, you can easily do that. And so, you can take a half a teaspoon of baking soda, put it in a half a cup of water, and not on an empty stomach because it does interfere with stomach acid, which we need to digest and keep SIBO at bay, etc. And so, first thing in the morning, last thing at night, sometime in between meals. And, everybody's dose is different depending on what's going on in their inner terrain in regards to the kidney.
Right, right. Yeah, great. I'm glad you explained that. So how does someone with chronic kidney disease end up having issues with their emotions, anxiety, depression, or cognitive issues? How are they connected?
Well, like I said, I'm delighted to have this conversation because I
Mm-hmm.
was personally accused when I was fairly sick of you need to handle your anxiety better.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that, wait a minute, I'm not anxious. I'm a meditator. I wasn't anxious, but I felt some neurologic discombobulation. And so I've looked into this for a long time, and both anxiety and depression
Mm-hmm.
are chemical conditions. And, with kidney, it really is not the disease. Oh, I'm sick, I'm depressed. Oh, I have stress in my life, I'm depressed. It's really not what's happening. And I took a little note, so I think I'm going to cheat a little bit and look so I can explain this well because I love this. So, basically with kidney dysfunction, you have nervous system problems, you have endocrine problems, immune system problems, and there's what we call uremic toxins, things that maybe other people can handle and process, but with diminished kidney function, they become nasty and start harming things. And so one of the things that I'm very aware of is the sympathetic nervous system overdrive. It's induced by the decline of kidney, and it starts early. Um, I found out about this because I have the COMT defect, which is, one of these gene defects that you can find out on things like, 21andMe or whatever those things are called. And our bodies break down these catecholamines, these stress hormones. Well, with kidney problems, they may not be getting broken down so well. And there's this enzyme that the kidney makes called renalase. What does it do? It breaks down catecholamines. And so as kidney decline is happening, they're lingering. And I was very aware of it personally because something might happen,
Mm-hmm.
an event, and my husband and I would both react to it. 5 minutes later, he's over it. Tomorrow, I might be over it. It's taking me time to process these chemicals and hormones. And that was a little bit alarming. I was like, wow, I'm becoming a dysfunctional person. I can't even get. So, doing a lot of meditative unreactivity practice has been really important to me. And so, what I wrote down is early and persistent. There's mood dysregulation. The big thing with kidney is the circulation. The kidney's a blob of blood vessels, and as it's one of those vicious cycles. Cardiovascular kidney, cardiovascular kidney, and so if the circulation's decreased to kidney, all the processes of detox and discernment aren't happening well, and all of a sudden there's symptoms like heightened vigilance.
Right.
I understand this one. Palpitations, restlessness, hyperarousal, poor sleep, aggravated high blood pressure, another one of those things. And so, a lot of stuff happens in that regard. Then the next one is dysregulation of brain function, of the hypothalamus pituitary axis, where a lot of our hormones are made, and cortisol is a huge thing. And again, with the renalase and breaking down, all of a sudden there's too much cortisol. Well, okay, so what? It's messing up your sleep, it's messing up serotonin, dopamine.
Right.
And these are all subtle things. It's not like you go to the doctor, well, I'm not doing that good. It's not considered. I mean, nobody ever asked me really about any of how I feel. Actually, 5 kidney specialists, nobody asked how I sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we really have to do better. And the functional thinking with kidney is life-saving to a lot of people. So with this cortisol elevation, because all of a sudden we're not processing it, fatigue, hopelessness, cognitive slowing. Gee, and so, when you image somebody with kidney disease, you'll see that their hippocampus and prefrontal cortex are declining.
Right.
Uh-oh. Next I have a few categories. I'm just running through this because I love this. It's brilliant.
Right.
Neuroinflammation. People don't think about I have kidney disease. So what about the brain? And Dr. Kat Toops and I have often shared thoughts about this because the brain and the kidney basically are partnering. And so when one's messed up, it's going to influence the other, just like heart,
and the gut.
That axis is huge. And so all of a sudden there's cytokines. Everybody knows cytokines after COVID, but kidney decline is another long haul.
Right.
And so you have, these nasty little chemicals that are going around messing up things in the brain, messing up serotonin, which is sort of a happy hormone, dopamine. And then there's too much norepinephrine, big stress hormone. I know this. I mean, and anybody with kidney disease, when you talk about it, it's like, oh yeah, that's how I'm feeling. And there's just a bunch of things that happen that mimics depression. But it isn't, I love the title of this podcast because it's like, well, it isn't depression, it's kidney disease. And if you work on the kidney, all of this abnormal, a big thing of coconuts just fell down. Sorry. It's like, it's loud and scary. Anyway, where was I?
No, you're talking about depression and how it could be a root cause for someone's depression. I mean, it's looking at the whole picture and looking for root causes, and that the downstream manifestation might be changes in hormones and neurotransmitters, but
Absolutely.
It could be potentially what really needs to be looked at is the filtration, one of the filtration systems, not just the liver, but also the kidney, which is often overlooked. So how would you, I'm looking forward to hearing about what are the interventions in remediating depression with remediating this decline of your kidneys? Like what are you talked a lot about the lifestyle changes and some things that people can do in terms of their diet,
Yeah.
but I want to hear more about the peptides that you might use. Are there specific peptides that you could
There
talk?
are, I mean, the first thing that I want to say is I have a list that I wrote for myself so I won't forget. Um, Nitric oxide is very important in this regard as a vasodilator and the effect on the neurotransmitters. So supplementing with some of the nitric oxide products can help. Arugula is a wonderful nitrate rich food that helps blood vessels and kidney. So that's one concept to think about. Resveratrol, because it influences some of these more increases the positive cytokines. I mean, they're not all bad. Berberine, we know for many aspects of kidney in this regard, it can help with the sort of psych-associated neurotoxicity. Omega-3s, because of the inflammation effect. Curcumin supports glutathione, and quercetin. Um, doing breath work for heart rate variability actually influences this. Sleep optimize, which I'll talk about with the peptides, but there's that, which also includes melatonin. Time restricted eating. It's short of noon here and we're just eating our breakfast, and so that actually can add some benefit in this regard. Vitamin D has a place, estrogen has a place, and melatonin has a place. So, and dealing with heavy metals, because I have a long list of what each one does in regards to this neurotoxicity. But getting tested isn't happening in most conventional settings, and yet we know the damage to the kidney tubules is insane. It's enormous, and it's all over the place. I mean, we're breathing them, we're drinking them. So that brings me to the peptides. Again, each patient is unique, and so taking a real history, not just a 2-minute how are you doing,
Right.
can really like fine tune where are you aiming,
Right.
because you can't take everything that there is that could help. So selecting, what does this person really need? And so
Right. So the warning here is, guys, whoever's listening to this, don't just start taking these things that we're going to be listing. It's really important to be evaluated by a health professional that is trained in functional medicine and even specifically peptides, because not all functional medicine providers are trained in peptides and bioregulators. So somebody who's really actually trained and to know that this is right for you, is looking at your specific conditions.
Yeah, exactly. And so basically, epitalin is one of my favorites. I love epitalin. It's 4 amino acids. It comes from the pineal, and the effect of pineal decline with kidney is a noticeable thing. I mean, sleep gets messed up, and there's an interesting thing with declining kidney is the circadian genes get messed up, and so things that you don't think of as happening at night are happening. There's nighttime arousal. There's blood pressure that's supposed to dip at night doesn't. So a lot of people are missing the fact that their blood pressure is up at night. I mean, I was one of them. So, I'm taking my blood pressure in the morning. I'm great. One day I didn't feel that good later in the day. So at like 11 o'clock at night, I took my blood pressure. It was sky high. And I learned about this. And so, all of this comes together where bad sleep causes mood disorders. And so, it's really the kidney causing this, not the brain. It's more secondary. And so epitalin helps with the circadian, it enhances the body's ability to make melatonin. And that helps the immune system. It's not really a sleeping pill, it's an immune balancer.
Mm-hmm.
Pinealon sounds like it's from the pineal, but it's cerebral cortex. It's a bioregulator. And that helps with cognition. It helps mood. It enhances the blood flow to the brain, which has the loop with kidney. And it works together with this enzyme renalase, which I've never heard anybody else talk about renalase. I mean,
I've never heard of
I
it.
have this funny story. We have we travel to Honolulu. I went to see, an internist early on. I was still pretty sick. And somehow I was mentioning renalase to her because I was busy researching everything. And she just got this like horrified look on her face. And she's like, I've never heard of it. And it's like, well, I never had either until I needed to know about it. And so it there isn't a way to test it that is affordable. And so you just have to assume, okay, the fact that this enzyme helps us break down what causes stress and you need it and it declines with kidney, what can I do? Pinealon works together with the renalase you have to amp up breaking down these stress hormones.
Wow.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a wonderful thing. And why is that happening? Because there's this DNA repair happening.
Right.
And so I love that. So,
I
what
do
I wrote
too.
here is decreased neuroinflammation and decreased catecholamine toxicity.
Mm-hmm.
And they work well together, they call them, they bundle them, because they're synergistic. And the
Mm-hmm.
other one that I wrote down was Vilon, which is this wonderful 2 amino acid thing that's like, it's so potent. It's from the thymus. These are glands that, in allopathic medicine, we don't talk about until you get a tumor.
Right.
But the thymus, really is kind of the choir director for the immune system. And there's a whole axis with thymus kidney. And so Vilon also protects the renalase and helps with inflammation in the body, which is the general what's going on if you have kidney problems, inflammation,
Mhm.
which then leads to oxidative stress and fibrosis, aka scarring, and that thing isn't working anymore.
Right. Right.
Can be reversed, but not easily. The sooner you do it before that fibrotic stuff happens,
Mm-hmm.
easier to repair. Not impossible, but much easier.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like with the liver, people don't talk about fibrosis of the liver or cirrhosis of the liver until it's way too late. But that's a
Exactly.
process that takes a lot of time. It's a progressive process. And there's no
Exactly.
way of knowing about it until it's, like I said, too late. And liver functions don't really help with that. So I'm assuming that the creatinine, the kidney functions don't really help you with that. The only way to know is to do an ultrasound. So there is a fibro scan for the liver. Is there one for the kidney?
Not that I know of. I mean, you can do an ultrasound and see some stuff. I mean, to me, it's still ink blot. I look at them, I'm like, okay, I'm glad that you see this. You can do CAT scans, which have some hazard to them, so it's not like you're going to run out and do that. But that's a good point. I'm going to put that on my list of look into that because we really don't have ways to look early. I mean, I've come up with some interesting urine testing that you can do. I learned this from a Chinese nephrologist
Mhm.
to find out that the tubules are declining. And, because creatinine doesn't have to do with the tubules really.
Right.
GFR doesn't either. And so, we're just going blind until hazard happens.
Well,
It's
you did
kind of silly.
mention, yeah, you did mention a test called the cystatin P and
Cystatin C, yeah.
C. Yeah, sorry, cystatin C. And I
Yeah.
have done that test on a couple of my patients that have had moderate renal insufficiency and
Mhm.
to take a look at that. And but it's not a common test that's done by conventional doctors. And And many conventional doctors allow for the kidney function to decline to. I had a patient who had an estimated GFR of 52, and she was told that she was fine. And it's like, no way, are you fine?
Yeah.
Like, that is just not the case, you
Yeah.
know. But she was also told that her hemoglobin A1C of 6.7 was normal and didn't need to be on any, hypoglycemic agents. Like, it's just crazy.
Speaking of which, the last of the bioregulators, I don't want to forget this, is pancreatin, which works with insulin resistance and glucose. And that's,
Right.
that's one of the biggest causes of kidney decline is, the epidemic of diabetes.
Absolutely.
And the pandemic of kidney disease is it's crazy, and so it really comes back to no matter how bad I feel, do I have some faith in life? And what level of spirituality can I bring into loving myself, loving life, surrender, acceptance,
Right.
forgiving myself for whatever, how did I get here? Gratitude.
Right. Right.
I'm grateful that I'm not on dialysis. In fact, I plan to never be on dialysis. I'm old enough that I would prefer to just decline to the end of my story. I haven't met that. Although I did go into our local dialysis center one day early on and declared, I will never see you again. And these two young Hawaiian women sitting there looking at me like I was a little crazy. Once they heard my story, were like, okay, we don't ever want to see you again, And so it really takes a level of fierce belief in yourself.
It does. It does.
And not whining about the dang diet, Okay, so I can't eat this, that, or the other thing. So
But I'm
what?
alive.
Exactly.
I'm alive.
I was a health food chef. I can take icky stuff and make it taste really good. The herbs and spices we use are actually medicines. And so my next project is my kidney garden to look at functional food because a lot of these things, I just did a blog post on Tulsi tea because Tulsi is wonderful medicine.
It is.
It's
Absolutely.
like, and it's like yummy.
Ayurvedic from India, right? Yeah. The holy
Exactly.
it's a holy basil. Yeah.
Holy basil, it's a weed in my garden here, and it's welcome. I put fertilizer around it when it volunteers in the past,
Right.
And so there really is a lot to do, and why I think this is important for people to know is if you see your kidney function declining and, look it up on AI and figure out your GFR. If it says greater than 60, figure out how to do it. You can even just pop it into Chat GPT. It'll tell you. It'll tell you what to do. And then recognizing that the pathology of what's happening is what's tethering emotions and mood and sleep and self-loathing. There's a lot of emotions that come up, and it helps to like watch them like the little bubbles and go, oh, you. And the limbic system programs are very helpful. I think that the mind body aspect of the limbic system, it's huge because a lot of the stuff that I talked about will damage the limbic system, and there's ways to fix it. The stop, stop, stop thing really influences the physiology. It's not just like some woo-woo thing. Oh, I'm just gonna, it actually does measurable change. And so this stuff's free, this is like free functional medicine, sit and watch the trees dance in the sky, stop,
In other
honor
words,
Sabbath, take a day off a week and focus on joy and health and art and creativity and instead of like, oh my God, I still have laundry. I say, there's so many strategies to bring that joyousness, which can counteract this physiology that doesn't feel good.
Right. I don't think people say that enough or realize that much, that is really, really important to do. A big piece of it is to really settle your nervous system. And so brain retraining does work for limbic activation, but it's looking at limbic activation as how you are perceiving your environment, or your brain is perceiving your environment. And it doesn't have to be that case. So
Yeah.
ultimately, it's really important to, get grounded in where you're at. What is it that you want in life? Believing in yourself and taking action, saying, I'm going to beat this. And it's
Yeah.
putting all of those free things in place as best as you can, like you said, doing the research, doing and working with someone if you don't know what to do, because there are so many things that can be done to improve your health. 100%.
Yay.
You're a living example of that. Yay.
I don't know. I mean, I weighed 82 pounds. I was pretty convinced I was on the drizzle down, and really had to just demand it of myself,
Right.
and stop getting caught in the negative loops. I mean, and I would come home from seeing the kidney specialist and cry
Right.
because the
So
negativity.
how many years have you been healthy?
I don't know how long is I mean, the diagnosis and the kidney surgery was in 2013,
Hmm.
and it took me some years. I mean, I slowly started getting better, but I still, I would have like 2 or 3 days a week sometimes where I was in bed.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like the flu. I felt that toxic,
Right.
I mean, I wouldn't have a fever, but I just feel like that. And which is how I started writing. It's
Right.
like, well, I can still write. I couldn't do much. And and so probably, in the last good 5 or 6 years,
Mm-hmm.
as I figured stuff out,
Right.
I can't even remember. I remember the moment where my GFR was 60,
Mm.
which is, okay, those people think I'm normal. And, I mean, my neighbors probably heard me giving a hooray howl. And and that's years ago now. So
Right.
it's, you
Awesome.
know, and I still am aware. I mean, I'm 75 this year, so there's that, I'm active. I live at the beach, I swim, I garden, I dance, I do yoga. Um, but I know if some intense hit came along, that
Mm.
I have a vulnerability.
Right.
So I'm not arrogant about it. I'm a little arrogant, like, hey, but there's always this like, oh God, I'm going to go get labs, and what are they going to be?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, there really is like an anxious worry state, but anxiety, I mean, you know this better than me, is kind of free float. This is a specific about something.
Right. Right.
So it's more of a concern than a state of anxiety.
Right.
Here's your Valium. See you later. And another sidebar, I mean, my mother had bad medical care until I kind of stepped in and started being the driver of it. And it turned out, I mean, she had been given so much Ativan and, Valium-ish meds. And it turned out she was hypoxic, had an artery to her kidney was too too tight, renal artery stenosis, and it led to congestive heart failure. So
Mhm.
she didn't have enough oxygen, and she was getting Valium for it.
I know, which just
Ah.
makes things worse.
And
Exactly.
Dragon Woman showed up, and we go along to the visits. I mean, I was fierce. I was just like, this is enough. And finally found a doctor who was like, she has renal artery stenosis, and by that time it was too late.
Right.
I mean, she was so damaged, and we basically had to hospice her.
Right.
So, I have a little
I know. Yeah,
something.
it feels like we always have these experiences. My mother-in-law was put into hospice 9 months ago, and she was put on morphine and Ativan to make her comfortable. Well, she kind of rallied, and 9 months later, she's still on the morphine and Ativan, and she's constipated, needs an enema. because she hasn't had a bowel movement in 3 days. Like, have you ever thought about
Not
the
funny,
fact
but
that she doesn't need to be on hospice anymore and doesn't need the Ativan and the morphine anymore? Like, really?
I know
Maybe that's why she's not getting out of bed and walking.
yeah, exactly right.
It's just it's just because people get really blind in just doing the robotic cookie cutter kind of thing. It's really sad.
I
So,
know.
yeah,
I
I
know, and
went in
especially with
there.
elders.
Yes.
Now that I'm getting older, I'm like, well, wait a minute, don't just dismiss. That's why I keep
Right,
being physical.
right,
I
right.
just saw a photo of Mick Jagger, who's 80 or 81, and the guy looked really good. And it's like, well, he
Right.
works
He's
out,
jumping all over the stage.
and apparently like works out a lot before tours. And so it's like, maintain your vigor.
Right,
I mean, even when I was laying on the bed, I would be there doing my leg lifts, and
right,
trying to maintain muscle because kidney disease decreases muscle. And I mean, you probably know more than I do, like the relationship of muscle to
hmm
to brain function. I mean,
absolutely. Well,
I,
the mitochondria, and the brain's full of mitochondria, and so are muscles. So
and so
yeah.
are kidney tubules.
Yes, yeah. So I would love to continue the conversation, but we're kind of out of time. It's been a pleasure talking to you about the kidneys and how it's connected to emotions and what people can do about it. So I'm it's a boatload of information, and I'm really happy for your book and huge
Yeah.
book
Show
there.
off this gorgeous book, beautiful artwork from a Ukrainian who totally heard what I wanted.
Uh-huh.
I have a website,
Mhm.
which is Renology is Kidney Success, all one run on.com.
Uh-huh.
And I'm blogging. There's a lot of talks that I've done. I mean, this one is so perfect because it's unique. I've done different talks depending on who it is. And you can educate yourself, and there's a way to reach out to me.
Mhm.
Um, I I really encourage you to like embrace kidney in a joyous way that I can and I will.
Great, great. Thank you so much, Dr. Robin Rose.
Thank
It's
you.
been a great pleasure, and I am really pleased that we were finally able to connect
I
and
know.
with all the technology issues that we've had. So I
Yeah.
appreciate your time. Have a great day.
Thank you all.